Night Radio's Kalalu presents Just Another Look. Just Another Look is an innovative, exciting, albeit decidedly provocative, and yes, certainly controversial, socio-political analysis of issues of a local, regional, and international nature. Just Another Look is heard on Night Radio on Saturdays at 6 p.m. with repeat broadcasts at 9 p.m. on Sundays. Catch us on the World Wide Web, www.nightradio.info. You can also catch us on Facebook and YouTube. I am, of course, Keith Joseph. Today, dear friends, is Saturday. It is the 15th day of February 2025. Welcome to another edition of your favorite program, Just Another Look. Blow hot, blow cold, blow hot again. Blow hot, blow cold, blow hot again. The foregoing is perhaps one of the best possible descriptions for the politics of Ralph Gonsalves and the Unity Labour Party that he leads. Blow hot, blow cold, blow hot again. You know, if one were to examine the political history of Gonsalves, one comes to an understanding of the nature of the individual and the type of leadership that he's committed to display. But generally, if one were to listen to politicians as they spout their messages from the political platforms, one would glean just what factors they bring to bear on trying to get their listeners, the electorate, to accept and support their respective stances. Stances that they have adopted as critical to their perceived success in politics. Over the years in his political history, Gonsalves appears to have been something of a political pendulum. He may disagree with that, but he has been something of a political pendulum, supporting his every stance with what some have perceived as his charisma, while others have seen it as being politically chameleonic. Now let's be clear. For what it's worth, Gonsalves has been seen by some as charismatic. He has been seen as capable of influencing listeners because of their perception of what they considered his charismatic characteristics. The gift of gab, a smooth talker, likable, compelling, convincing, creative, reasonable, smart, persuasive, and perhaps full of himself. Generally, those are the characteristics associated with charisma. Interesting, isn't it? Full of himself, a smooth talker, likable, compelling, convincing, creative, reasonable, smart, and persuasive. You'll learn more by way of characteristics, but we'll allow those to suffice for now. But it's important to note that nowhere in any definition of the word charisma or in the identification of the characteristics associated with being charismatic would you find the word truth or honesty being included. In other words, it is not to be assumed that a charismatic person is automatically expected to be truthful in all that is spoken at any given time. So it's all right. Some people believe Donald Trump is charismatic. And over the last 8 to 10 years, people have been fact-checking almost every statement he makes. Except it's not good it is, unfortunately. People are afraid to do any fact-checking. And many are afraid that if they do any fact-checking and make a claim that something being said by Gonzalez is not true, then it comes back bellowing, "I don't lie." But people may remember some years ago when he said he may lie about certain things. And here on Just Another Look, we noted that he did not identify those things which may be categorized in those certain things. What exactly, and when are you supposed to know when he's lying about certain things? One of the things about the charismatic leader is that there is so much conviction, so much influence in their persona that they bellow things with a level of confidence that people are literally eager to accept as truth. And you see, the business of charisma is the ease with which listeners are taken in. Because they're not listening to content per se. They are becoming ever more acceptive of the persona, the individual doing the talking. And it is one reason why charismatic people gravitate towards the leadership of political parties, the leadership of organizations. So, nowhere in the definition of the word charisma, nowhere in its characteristics is there a concept of truth, a concept of honesty. And we can always check that ourselves. So, a charismatic person is not automatically expected to be truthful or honest in all that is spoken or done at any given time. Indeed, it is usually the case that charismatic leaders find themselves going to great lengths to add in their public presentations that they are speaking the truth, that they are honest, and of course, that they are humble. It is almost as if they are themselves uncertain as to how they are perceived, for the most part, by their listeners. It is one thing to think yourself charismatic. It is one thing for others to say you are charismatic. But you're never really sure. So you continue to try to convince your listeners that you are charismatic, strengthening the belief in yourself as being charismatic. And that's the Gobelian component as well. That's what happens. That's what Goebbels was saying. If you tell a lie often enough, not only will your listeners begin to believe it, but you too will be unable to tell the difference between truth and lie. And sometimes that happens with charismatic people and charismatic leaders. They get to a point where, because they are aware that the audience is focused on their traits, their characteristics, rather than the content of what they say all sorts of things. And they expect it to be accepted without question. And so what you have, and why we talk of political tribalism, the foundation of political tribalism is that same reality of being able to convince one's followers, the members of one's political party, that everything we do and say is to be accepted as right and proper. So that no matter how you try and you ponder, why are they in agreement with some things that you consider not so appropriate for the society? That doesn't enter their thinking. Once it comes from the charismatic leader, it is accepted. We want to understand that, and we want our listeners to understand that. Because you may continue to ask yourself why day in, day out it appears there's so much of Dr. Gonzalez says, Dr. Gonzalez says, Dr. Gonzalez says, of so much of him being in the studio talking to the nation day after day. Not every day, but select days during the week and on a weekend when you have your time. It is part of the political strategy, of course, so that you keep hearing. You can close your eyes and almost hear him regurgitating some of his ideas about what he's doing. And it is that kind of political operation that is consistent with the charismatic leader's understanding of how he or she continues to impact his or her minions. It is a deliberate strategy. It is part psychological or largely psychological for the most part. Yeah? So the charismatic leader can, if he so she so desires, take the electorate in almost any direction. And we become tribalistic when we start to adopt the trappings of the charismatic leader. When everything that falls from his mouth is readily accepted. When everything that falls from his table is readily appreciated. So sometimes even the touching, being touched by the charismatic leader, being hugged, being kissed, etc., etc., all of that is part and parcel of the dynamics of charismatic leadership that ultimately facilitates political tribalism. It's not only here. It's not only here. So it's not only in St. Vincent. It's across the Caribbean. And as you see in the last US elections in the United States and other parts of the world. Yeah? So that there's a tendency for followers of the charismatic leader not to concern themselves with content. Not to concern themselves with content, but to accept that since it has come from the leader, right? So the leader has to continue. When this charisma starts to wane, the charismatic leader finds it necessary to shore up the image by talking about such virtues as humility, etc., etc. But the very repetition of how humble one is raises questions, because humility is a virtue, and humble people don't talk about themselves. They are exemplars by dint of being who they are. Anybody you hear have to insist almost every time they talk of their level of humility, of their level of honesty, beware. Beware. It is necessary to say those, just as, it is necessary for them to say those things repeatedly, because they are also convincing themselves that what they are saying is truth. Humility is a virtue. And you don't get it, and you don't get others to accept it because you tell them how humble you are, and how much you love them, and how honest you are. Those are fundamental principles. And the psychology of repeating it is as much for the speaker as it is for the minions to whom he or she is speaking. Just think of it. Think of your own virtues and see whether it becomes necessary for you to wear it on your forehead. We talk about quoting scripture because the history of Caribbean politics has been intertwined with religion from the very beginning. So when you hear people talking about religion not being part of politics, it has always been in the Caribbean. It has always been. It has been part of movements during slavery as slaves attempted to get their freedom. Many of the revolutions were hatched within the ambit of religious groups with an understanding of their right to freedom. But we also know that they talk about not taking credit for your good works, because your good works will speak for themselves. But politicians, while quoting scripture, don't appear to believe that. Yes? It's not the one who cries, Lord, Lord, that is first to enter the kingdom. It's not the one that stands up in public and says how much he prays or she prays that gets into the kingdom first. It is let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and give praise to your Father in heaven. That's what it says. But some not so sure that is what is intended. So they boast daily about everything that they do because they want you to know this is a good work that I am doing for you. And they want your praise because they're not sure that they're likely to get praise in heaven. So they want to get the praise here and now. So here, I give you this. I give you that. I do this for you. I do that for you. And if you don't give them the support, you're ungrateful. Because they could tell you everything that they did for you. When in truth and in fact, often what the charismatic leader is doing when he tells you that is, I did it me. You just happen to be a conduit, but I really did it for me. So praise me. Keep me there. Make sure I remain in charge, because I am the only one that can look after you. You can't look after yourself. And that's why it is often the case that charismatic leaders begin at some stage in their lives to operate like demigods. They become so deluded that they operate as though they are gods. They operate as though they are gods. And so sometimes you ponder as you listen to Gonzalez and his monologues from the studio. You sit down and you wonder whether or not Eduardo Lynch was correct. That the Unity Labour Party appears to be an institution that can be compared to one encyclopedia and a set of copybooks. So, and I use the term copybooks deliberately because we want you to understand that the mode of operation of the institution appears to be that you copy what I do and how I do it. Copying in that sense. It is that all of the ideas about almost everything that is happening in the country is addressed in those monologues. Listen to them. And ask yourselves, why is it so necessary? No other minister of government appears eager to be in a studio so many days, so often, in order to get his or her message across. But the leader, the charismatic leader, reaches a stage in his or her life where he or she begins to operate as though everything begins with and ends with him or her. Without me, the party can do nothing. Without me, you can do nothing. And so all of you have to understand that in my humility, I am being honest with you. Only I could have achieved it. And so you become increasingly concerned about the pitfalls of charismatic leadership. When you find someone telling you, I, the youngest head, I do the plan. The plan's so good, others have to study the plan, you know. And not no ordinary people studying the plan. Universities studying the plan. It doesn't matter that I can't tell you which universities and which professors. But I do the plan. And so once I tell you the level of individuals and institutions that are studying the plan, you understand it's no little thing. That's what you have to understand. So the charismatic leader believes so much in him or herself that they find themselves repeating over and over and over the same lines that are designed to have their listeners remain ever convinced, but more importantly from a political standpoint, more loyal. More loyal. And while you are not told that you're ungrateful, it is always the case that I need to let you know that you are where you are in large measure because of me. because of I. And we look after our own. That is why politicians can often get up, believing in their own charisma, and strengthened by comments of their membership, such as, we must own the jobs too. In other words, everything that happens in the country must be owned by us. Songs familiar? So that sometimes when you listen to the Trump and the trumpeters, you get a sense that you're listening to some nutty grenadines. Amazing, isn't it? Amazing. Charismatic leaders often spend much of their time practicing. It's not something that happens by VAPS. It is something that is deliberate. They rehearse on a regular basis because they have to practice how to convince those who meet, greet, and listen to them of the power of their charisma. Because this is the most important tool in their arsenal. And it's the reason why the rehearsal is primarily at the local level, because at the regional and international level, people see through it immediately. And you can't come and try to trick them and convince them about your humility and whatever else and whatever else. Because they're not under your spell. They are not exposed to your daily repetition of your ideas, your views, on your attempt to convince them of what you are saying. So you sometimes find yourself saying ludicrous things when you get into the regional forum, because you yourself would have grown so accustomed to a sort of simple-mindedness that they are not prepared to accept. But just in case you feel you will fall off, whatever is said abroad, and make sure it is published at home or played enough by the media to remind you, this is me, this is your charismatic leader. Listen, hear me, follow me, accept me, etc., etc. So the political tribalism that the charismatic leader encourages in a country is reflected in all sorts of ways. The colors that you wear. If you go around St. Vincent on any Grenadines on any given day, you realize who wears what color, who wears, and make sure that everything they have is red. Look at them. Stand on the side of the road in Kingston, any part of Kingston, and look at those who have suddenly so changed their wardrobe that almost daily they're wearing something red. It is an identification with a political party. That's what has happened in the country. And equally, others identify with yellow. But those in red are cognizant of the importance of showing their loyalty in their dress code. He said, "Business guys, you talking about? Look around and watch those who have made red an integral part of their daily dress code. Because they have to be identified with the party." That's the impact of charismatic leadership. That the issue of loyalty extends to that. So charismatic leaders take much of their time to practice how they will use their charisma, how they will use their charm. Because they use their charm to inveigle those around them. And they test the waters all of the time. They give you a little hug. And if you try to move out of the hug, they know that there's a little concern about the politics here. So they use the little hug here and there. They give you an occasional kiss with the hug. And the physical interaction exudes the whole 9 yards because they need to give you the impression that this is all about caring for you. It's all about caring for you. Once the terms of endearment have been established, communicated, and accepted, any and everything follows. Any and everything follows. That is true across the entire English-speaking Caribbean. That is how people get different levels of accusation. That is how families are often broken up. Yep. That's the truism. One of the things that our historians across the Caribbean are afraid to talk about is this rapid decline in morality across the political spectrum in this Caribbean of ours. They are afraid to speak of it. Go through the history written by our peoples in the Caribbean, our historians. It may well be that they themselves are caught up in the same sort of behavior. And so it's a difficult topic for them to deal with. But that is our reality. So even our historians fall prey to this approach. But they are human beings and they'll tell you they are human. So they themselves get caught up in this behavior. Often unwittingly, they too readily accept that there's a new dispensation in this historical epoch. The absence of any sort of morality. The rapid decline in ethics and ethical behavior. And we send that down the pipeline as part and parcel of our historical transformation. That is our society. We accept it. And we readily expect that over time, successive generations will take it to another level. And they find everybody else to blame except themselves. That's why old people used to tell you, physician, heal thyself. Physician, heal thyself. In biblical terms, they talk about take off the beam in your eye first before trying to take it out, or the speck in others. There are charismatic leaders can't see the beam in their own eyes. They're too busy trying to sell themselves as leaders to be followed, not to stand side to side. And so you look at our political institutions. You look at the years of political history of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and the conduct of quote-unquote charismatic leaders. And you have an understanding of why it is we are where we are today. There's much talk about an education revolution where we slavishly join the line and wine because we refuse to think for ourselves. We refuse to believe that we have reached a level of maturation that we can make decisions based on fundamental principles. It's easier to join somebody else's line. That's why we mention those Nordic countries that have said enough. We need to go back to having our children read. We need to go back to having our children read. Because the technology as an attention grabber movement, growth, development of the attention economy does not allow people to want to think. It's easier to find somebody else's ideas. It's why increasingly, if you're honest, you'll be concerned about some of the SBAs you get because you don't know who wrote it. And increasingly, people are using artificial intelligence to do just about everything for them so that they don't really have to think. We want an easy life where all the answers are readily provided for us. And charismatic leaders allow people to give up on their own thinking patterns because your interest is mammon. Your interest is materialism. And what provides that materialism is acceptable almost without question. You see, generally, dear friends, academics have suggested that we have three types of leadership. Traditional leadership, which is based on customs, customary practices in a society. And you still have some of those, particularly in Africa, parts of Asia. Leaders who are emergent because of tradition, royalty. We have charismatic leadership. The individual's characteristics take primacy. And those believe Others believe in rational legal leadership. That with the advent of science, people rationalize based on merit that this or that person should become the leader of your organization. But of course, this structure of traditional, charismatic, and rational legal leadership does not make allowances for corruption. Yeah? It does not take allowances for individuals looking after their own interests, for fear of others moving into position. You surround yourself with sycophants, people who are so loyal to you that they will never question their own capacity to be your replacement. That's part and parcel of charismatic leadership. They keep at a distance those who they perceive as potential threats to their continued dominance of the system, be it political party or business organization or club. Hence the reason that it is so important for them to continue to market their charisma. But when you realize that your physical characteristics are no longer attractive and appealing, then you have to use whatever is left. Let them listen to you over and over and over and over again. Market your ideas. Market your way of seeing and things. In the midst of an education revolution in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, so-called education revolution, we continue to stifle creativity. Creativity in thinking. Our people are not anxious to read. They're not anxious to learn new things and to keep pace, capable of analyzing everything that comes to the fore. It's much easier to simply say, let me take this up and run with it because the charismatic leader says it's the right thing to do and it's good. We don't take time to reflect on ourselves, on where we are, who and what we have become. That is too hard, too difficult for us. Just follow, join the line. Become part of the system. Unwilling to use one's critical thinking skills to analyze what is happening around us. You know, the fact is that we ought, in an education revolution so-called, to be encouraging, stimulate thinking, stimulate, most importantly, critical thinking, allow the ideas of others to come forth, to be ventilated, and consensus arrived at. Instead, we start off with my idea, my plan, that I am marketing to everybody. Loyalty demands that you follow my plan because I am the best at it. That is the St. Vincent and the Grenadines we now live in, and which we are being sold, marketed as ideal for development. Suddenly we are hearing so much about loss of our coastlines, the loss of our beaches, the degradation of our beaches. In the last 6 months, Vincentians have heard more about the impact of climate change on our beaches than you have probably ever heard in the last 24 years. Check and see. Suddenly, that has become an issue. But people forget it was an issue being raised by some of our academics for a long time. What was the response when the likes of Dr. Murray began talking about the dreadful impact that would have been visited upon this country if we had followed the promotion of the cross-country road as the politicians wanted us to do? Daniel Cummins talked about the impact it would have on our water courses. Where were those who are now looking at our terrain? What were they thinking then? Or what it is about the current period that has them sort of almost like scaremongering? How much of our coastline will disappear in the next 5 years? How much have we have lost in the last 5? How much we're going to lose by the time 2030 plus. Where were we? And what were we thinking? And what did we come away with when they started the international discussion on climate? We were there in South America for the first edition. By the time we went to the second edition, what did we put in place consistent with the outcome of that first Global Environmental Conference? What did we do? How suddenly we are concerned about our coastlines? Did we not observe on what was called the Argyle Stretch, the coastal degradation every year? Do we not remember that people used to be playing football and flying their kites on the far side of the then Argyle Stretch? And did we not know and observe when the cable kite flying competition had to move inside the area that was now bordered by the Argyle Road? Do we not remember? But we weren't concerned then about the loss of our coastline and our beaches. Suddenly, like VAPS, this has become a talking point. Suddenly, it would have been funny had it not been so pathetic. But this is what passes for leadership. We have allowed those who were sending us signals, telling us stop thinking of airy-fairy concepts because they sounded politically attractive, and get real. So years ago, Reynold Murray, here at home, and then when he was working at the regional level, kept saying to Vincentians, be mindful of what is happening with our coastlines. Be mindful of what is happening with our environment. Go talk to Dr. Murray. Go talk to him. Because what apparently became our priorities had nothing or little or nothing to do with the protection of our environment. Now suddenly, somebody wake up. And the concern for the degradation of our beaches is the best thing since sliced bread. That's how we run the country. Charismatic leaders determine if and when an issue is important. So we take our marching orders from those who lead us. Because you're not part of any consultative democracy. That was promised in the manifesto of 2001 of the Unity Labour Party. They have assumed power since then. And go through the list for yourself. Where is that consultative democracy? When the people in North Leeward protested what they perceived to be the invasion of North Leeward's hills, two politicians in office, two ministers of government, was sent to the area to explain to them. And when the people, the protesters, lamented the absence of consultation, suddenly that visit became the first of a series of consultations. How many consultations have they had since? The people, the protesters told them, this is not a consultation. You came because we were protesting. But Rado is the better for all that has transpired. Rado is now an integral part of the system. So there is no consultative democracy. And it's extremely difficult to understand the redefinition of consultancy and consultative democracy. Just as we have heard from one of the judges of the appeal court relative to the decision on the teachers recently, on the public servants, when he talks of the redefinition of abandonment. The redefinition of abandonment in the middle of the case. It's amazing, isn't it? Because when you've been following the situation in the last couple of years with the U.S. Supreme Court and its decisions relative to matters relating to the presidency of the United States and the powers of the president. When you read the newest member of the Supreme Court, Brown, and her comments in dissenting to some of the decisions, you have an understanding of how scholarship receives her attention. How scholarship drives her decision making. And so when you read the dissenting judges' comments recently, in contrast to what the other two had said, you be the judge. You be the judge. Remember, in the case of the investigation into the Otley Hall Shipyard and Marina. They were all honorable men. All honorable men. And by the time of presenting an interim report, a direct accusation was leveled at James Mitchell's involvement. He wasn't even called to the inquiry as yet, but they already concluded in their interim presentation that he played a major role in cooking up the thing. Mitchell says, okay, but let me clear my name. In this Eastern Caribbean, how many years a former prime minister had to find resources to go back and forth in our court system trying to get his name cleared. Several years before several judges in this Eastern Caribbean. And then the matter take little more than half an hour at the Privy Council. Ain't nobody feel shame? I would have feel shame. I would have felt so shame. That's the reality. Yeah? So, we are in a system here where people can define and redefine because they have the authority so to do. No wonder justice is characterized by a blindfolded lady holding a scale. It's unfortunate that they put a lady there. Because in this day of gender equity, it could be anybody you put there. But blindfolded, tell you justice is blind. And the scales tipping. So we have that kind of situation. You watch and listen to the comments made. Remember, comment made by our Prime Minister at the CARICOM meeting that was addressing crime, and he offered his views as to one of the major causes of crime. That left many wondering, where did this come from? But after making his comment about high-valued women and the impact they are having on men to facilitate the maintenance of their lifestyle, he then proceeded to say, and all of you know I am speaking the absolute truth. Not a single prime minister in the room made any adverse comment. Not one. So it leaves those who attempt to think for themselves decidedly bothered. Decidedly bothered. And so we're now trying to find ways. We watched crime developing in Jamaica, and then Trinidad and Tobago, then Barbados, Guyana. Then we watch it spread in other countries. Remember years ago when a minister was blown up on a vessel off of St. Kitts, a Kittitian minister. St. Kitts, with just a population of just over 50,000, had a murder rate that was significantly higher than many countries around the world. Indeed, it got a position in global ranking. we got a position in Caribbean and global ranking in 2023. We got that in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Bear in mind that we had the same government in position since 2001. And look at the murder rate over those 23 years under one government. If we are honest with ourselves, we would want to examine how we got here. But that is not something that we are discussing. Consultative democracy, or the type that was supposed to have been implemented here, doesn't seem to facilitate people coming together to discuss honestly what is happening, because the leadership is decidedly charismatic. So why are you wanting to involve anybody else? You see, it is often argued that in contemporary society, an era in which science dominates almost all that we do, rational legal leadership is supposed to dominate. But there is evidence that charismatic leadership persists and remains decidedly persuasive in politics, not just in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, not just in the Caribbean, but increasingly around the world. Reality suggests that charismatic leaders of today are adept at using their charm to so engage the electorate with the gift of gab that science is easily challenged until long after voting patterns have yielded. I want to repeat that. Reality suggests that charismatic leaders of today are adept at using their charm to so engage the electorate with the gift of gab that science is easily challenged until long after voting patterns have yielded. Witness our society. Witness our society. When people ask, why didn't we implement the proposed right of recall of parliamentary representatives who fall short in terms of the conduct of their responsibility, the fulfillment of their responsibility? When we ask, why are we still prime ministerial dominant? And we are told, you see, those are things we wanted to change. We wanted to get rid of the monarchy and all sorts of things under the new constitution. But all you reject that. All you reject that. So, in a sense, there is no goodwill, because one would have imagined that if in his years of writing and identifying challenges to the Westminster system that still holds sway in Caribbean countries, that our own Prime Minister, backed by his academic strength, would have taken the time to say, let me lead by example and show the rest of the Caribbean, indeed the rest of the world, that it is possible to be the leader of a country and facilitate a gradual diminution of the powers of the Prime Minister, which I have criticized in my writings. Let me decrease the powers of the Prime Minister and empower the people and my fellow parliamentarians. That would have been something that would have been historic, and it would have been even revolutionary. But no, we didn't vote for the new constitution. So, c'est la vie. According to the old people, what is to his must is. Yeah? Because that is what one would have expected from leadership. A commitment to what one wants to carry forward. So if you promise me a consultative democracy, I expect you to do that. But decades later, it has not been done, and you're not talking about it. In a consultative democracy, we would not still be arguing as to why the Poverty Assessment Report of 2018 has not yet seen the light of day. And we have to address that matter by leaked documents. But the report has not seen the light of day officially from the government, who loves the nation so much. But yet that government that loves the nation so much is willing to explain to the nation that it was not happy with the way the survey was conducted, and therefore were not happy with the results. They didn't think the results would have been correct if the methodology to accessing those, to getting to those results was faulty as far as they were concerned. But that is not for public discussion. We will do it internally because we are the government. So you don't need any consultation for that. We have determined that we didn't like the way the survey was done. So we're not telling you the results. We're not telling you the results. We tell you we didn't like how it was done. And therefore, we're not making it available. We can do it over. We'll do it over. So is it we'll do it over in order to get the desired results we want? How are you rephrasing the questions? Since we are not privy to what you said were problems, identify them for us. Engage the nation in a public consultation and identify where the problems were with the process. Tell us why you didn't like this particular question. How many of those you did not like? But also tell us what were the responses obtained to those questions that you didn't like. Tell us what the report said. Give it to us. Let us judge for ourselves. But you see, we can't do that because people may find different reasons to accept certain paths. It may be uncomfortable. So a government in power for more than 2 decades determined in its own wisdom the result of a national survey that is as important as informing the nation of the state of poverty alleviation in this country. That is a fundamental lack of trust in the people of a country. It is saying to the nation, I have introduced an education revolution since coming into office in 2001. And 18 years on, I can tell you, I am not releasing a document to you because I don't like how it was done. Isn't that also suggesting that I don't trust you to use or to see or to discuss what was actually emergent from the research that was undertaken? Was there ever a case before where you were so dissatisfied with a survey on poverty alleviation that you didn't think it appropriate for the public to see? And if the shoe were on the other foot, would you have insisted that the document, regardless, be made public? You know, the old people say, do so and like so. Do so and like so. We have a very difficult position in which we find ourselves. What we are saying here is not new, you know. And Gonzalez is well aware of charisma and the role that charisma plays in politics. Very, very much aware. You remember that in the elections for 1994, the election campaign for the 1994 elections, when they had the Labour MNU platform, the telephone was the symbol. They went into the election as Labour MNU. And there was a rally being held by the Labour MNU at the junction in Bayabu. And a vehicle looking like the one Panel Campbell owned and drove was passing. And everybody heard when someone says, "Look, Panel." And the speaker on the platform at the time started calling Panel Campbell political Kokobe. Political Kokobe. And repeated it several times so that it became a chant. And people gravitated towards the vehicle so that it would slow the passage of the driver and the occupants. And so they moved towards the vehicle chanting political Kokobe, Kokobe, Kokobe. And were shocked when they got there that it was not Panel Campbell. It was the Vincentian who had been working in Trinidad and Tobago for years, who had come back to the country and was doing some work in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. But he looked like Panel. But the business, there were no apologies by the way, but the business of political Kokobe raises, and raised then and raises now, an interesting concept. Because a Kokobe is almost like a chameleon. The whole idea is the capacity to change one's skin color, to be transformed to suit the situation, the environment at any point in time. And so the intention was to suggest that PR has somehow been engaged in some sort of political transformation, working with the NDP. But it's interesting because when you examine the politics of this country, we have had several instances of people in politics being accused of changing their political coloration to suit themselves in order to move up in the system. We've had several of those. People may remember the history of the UPM. And why certain people left the UPM. What were the critical factors involved? We hope our historians will recount that, so that people can see for themselves exactly who were and have been the political cocobees in Vincentian political history. So that the truth is told and that people can understand the political transformations that have taken place by individuals and determine for themselves whether or not they were doing so because of political convenience, because of political opportunism. And we hope our historians will reveal the changing political ideological positions of those political cocobees in Vincentian history. And that our historians will allow us to have an understanding as to why it is some people can utilize their charisma to overly explain their political ideological transformation, and how they can use their charisma to exchange or to explain the types of politics in which they have engaged over time, and what were their objectives, and were they achieved or not, and what level of compromises they have been able to make and justify through their charisma. So where are we in Vincentian politics today? What have we become? And how prepared are we to honestly engage ourselves in an analysis of our politics when we look at charisma in Vincentian politics? There was an interesting period because Ken Boye was seen as charismatic, and you heard people talk about that at his funeral, of his perceived charisma. So when Boye was in the ULP, here you have Gonzalez seen as charismatic and Boye seen as charismatic. Was there a clash of charismas? Was there a sense in which Gonzalez appeared fearful that Boye's charisma and his popularity in St. Vincent and the Grenadines at the time and his position in perception though it be within the Eastern Caribbean in particular, did that give him a level of popularity more so than the popularity of the academic Ralph Gonsalves, such that Gonsalves may have been fearful that in a head-to-head within the party, Boye might have been voted the leader instead of himself? And we ask that question because the author of that mumbo-jumbo legal document, or seemingly legal document, that suddenly popped up and was circulated around St. Vincent and the Grenadines, that purported to analyze the chances of Boye winning his case that was brought against him by ECGC, by the government, for his stint at ECGC, along with Smokey. But the document focused more on him and his chances of winning the case. That document concluded that he had little chance of winning the case. But it came at a time when many perceived Boye as a potential candidate for leadership of the ULP. Did the two happen by accident? That at the time that people were thinking of that, this seemingly legal mumbo-jumbo document emerged in the public domain. Why did it come at that particular juncture? Was it an attempt by some to try to negate Boye's chances if he had desired to become leader of the party? Was it intended to suggest perhaps we should not run Boye at all? Because if he loses this case, and the chances are, from all reading of the situation, he may lose this case, or he may not win it. Would that damage the party? Would that damage him? Those were the questions that document appeared to be addressing. But nobody claimed responsibility for the document. It was never signed by anybody. It just appeared and then disappeared. And we sit in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and we allow these things to pass. We try to take them out of our memories as if they were not important. But it was reflective of an internal issue within the Unity Labour Party. And why would that have been done? You listen to who said what at Boye's funeral, Because Boye was dead. So you could say anything after he's dead. But history reminds us of that particular instance where to this day no one has officially claimed responsibility for a document purporting to have engaged in a critical analysis of Boye's chances in his case with ECGC. A document that surfaced at a critical juncture in the leadership history of the Unity Labour Party. But that's what we're talking about. It is possible to have these kinds of issues and they are quickly buried in the hope that nobody brings them up again. But it is important for us to understand that it is a critical part of this nation's political history and reveal the depth to which some people are prepared to go. Yep. Nobody claimed responsibility for writing it. Some may suggest it was a piece of political mischief. But you see, we are so fearful. Perhaps it's not so much fear. Perhaps it is that people are eager to capitulate. And the old people say, once your bread buttered, what are you worried about? And so as we get to elections, again, one is likely to continue to see that buttering of the bread. The galvanized cement, steel, concrete, all that going to come up. All that going to come up again. It'll be part of the Lives to Live program. And we have the issue of our attention, our loss of attention to the issues that matter in Vincentian society. Because we are so readily distracted by the social media. Our attention is pulled in so many different ways. One thing Papa understands, they will hear me often enough, just as they heard in the days of Glenn Jackson. Be present, be heard as often as is possible. Let no one else understand that I am in charge, that the party is mine. But while that may be so, St. Vincent and the Grenadines has long ceased to be a plantation. Are our educated people willing to be part of the broader discussion on what has become of St. Vincent and the Grenadines? Of what level of involvement ought each of you, each of us, what level of involvement must we undertake for the betterment of the society? It is not about I. It cannot be that when it suits people's pride and purposes, we choose to say we. We choose to talk about us. We choose to talk about one people and one nation. When in the practical course of any given day, the coloration of your politics, increasingly identified by the coloration of your dress code, is the single most important feature in determining your fortunes, in determining your life chances. Enough said. You've been listening to another edition of Nice Radio's Callaloo presentation, Just Another Look. Just Another Look is an innovative, exciting, albeit decidedly provocative, and yes, certainly controversial socio-political analysis of issues of a local, regional, and international nature. Just Another Look is heard on Nice Radio. On Saturdays at 6 p.m. repeat broadcast. On Sundays at 9 p.m. on www.niceradio.info. But you can also find us on Facebook and YouTube. I am, of course, Keith